Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living, Victoria. If you have not joined us before, my name is Carrie Hunter, and I'm the Spiritual Director of the Center for Spiritual Living, Victoria. Typically, we meet on Cook Street in the Cook Street Village Activity Center at 380 Cook Street. However, because of the pandemic, of course, we're meeting online right now. And if you'd care to join us when we are back in our facility, we would love to welcome you there. Right now, the word of Dr. Bonnie Henry is that we are closed for another month. We'll have an update in February, and let's just hope we can all be together again at that time, because as wonderful as it is to see one another on Zoom, it's much more wonderful to see one another in person. So I'm really happy to welcome you here today, whether you're with us on Zoom or on a recording sometime after Sunday. And I'd like to open with an opening prayer and just invite you all to just go into your heart of Sacred Hearts and just allow yourself to feel that presence within, that sacred presence of God. And as we turn to the beloved within, we know that there is but one power, one presence, one truth, one love, one wisdom, that oneness that Reverend Rachel spoke of in her meditation this morning. We are all one with each other. It is that power of God, that intelligence that binds us together, because there is no separation between each of us and everything around us. And so today, I open with something that we typically close with, and that's, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. And let us now see this happening all over the world. And let us know that we are richly blessed today as we go through our service today, through this gathering, knowing that a higher consciousness is at work, that is leading us in all that we do, that is leading us in our thoughts, in our deepest desires, in our word, the word that we speak, knowing that we are uplifting this planet and knowing that good prevails, and knowing that people everywhere are feeling this great awakening in their hearts and in their minds, and standing up for what is right, what is true, what is beautiful. And today we bless the United States of America. And we bless those people who are doing the best that they can do to bring about law and order. And we bless the President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris and the Congress of the United States, knowing that they are held in safety during the days ahead, and that the violence that has been foisted upon them during this past week is no more. God is bigger than anything. God is bigger than anyone. God is the power. And we see people everywhere using this power for good, not misusing it. And so as I bless them, I bless everyone in our country and everyone everywhere, knowing that we are led to right action, to right thoughts, to right beliefs, knowing we understand the power of our thoughts, the power of our word. And I bless each of us as we go forward today into this time together, and that as we share this energy, this intelligence, that it grows phenomenally. It is so much greater than just one of us alone. And so we hold in our hearts all those who are dear to us, all those we haven't even met, knowing that God is at work in the highest form possible, and that all is well and that peace prevails. I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for each one of you as I just heap blessings and love upon you. And so it is. And so welcome again, everyone. It's lovely to see you here today. As you know, in the month of January, for spiritual living all over the world, go back to basics. So we go back to the fundamentals of what this teaching is all about. And as I said last week, it's so important that we remember this, because as we go along and we're not always consciously using this power every day, we kind of get cracks in our foundations. We tend to forget. And so this is the time that we mend the foundations, the time that we make them whole. And last week, of course, I talked about the thing itself, which is the first chapter in the Science of Mind textbook. And actually, the month of January is devoted to that first part of the book, which I call kind of a primer for religious science. It has in it everything that we really need to know. And then Dr. Holmes expanded upon that in his writings, not only in the Science of Mind textbook, but in so many of the other books that he wrote. But when we really get those first 4 chapters, when we really understand them, then we're using that power. We know how to use it to our greatest advantage. And of course, the thing itself is God itself. And it's not that old man on a cloud that some of us were taught as young children. It's not someone who is sitting up there judging us. It is the intelligence of the universe. It is that which created everything. It's that which was the power that created the particles that then, exploded into this amazing cosmos, and that continues to expand at a million miles. I think it's a million miles a minute, I read. It's impossible for us to believe this kind of thing or to even comprehend it. And yet we live in this magnificent, magnificent place with this power. And when we understand that it is within us, we are unlimited. And so last week, the thing itself reminds us of the unlimited beings that we are. And when we really get that, then we can start to look beyond that. And the second chapter of the Science of Mind textbook is the way that it works. And so, to really simplify things, the way that it works is it works through us. It needs a vehicle through which to work. It needs a vehicle through which it can create. And we are those vehicles. And so we are ever creating. Now, whether or not anybody knows anything about this teaching, it's happening to them. God, the thing itself, this intelligence, this power and wisdom, is working through each person. The thing is that it isn't working from our consciousness. It's working randomly. And so whatever it is we happen to believe about ourselves, about the life around us, about what's going on for us, is what we're creating. And if we look at our lives and exactly the way they are, then that's what we're creating. And it's either random in the sense that we don't understand that it's happening, or it's conscious. Now, the thing is, as you all know, if we're thinking about negative thoughts all the time, if we're being the victim all the time, if we're complaining about things all the time, then this intelligence doesn't know to do anything but to say, okay, here, let me give you some more of it. That's what you're focused upon. And so when we start focusing upon instead the way we want our lives to look, and do not remove our focus from that, but just live with it, live with health and happiness and prosperity and joy and peace and safety, all of those things in our lives, then that's what we're manifesting. And when we're doing that for the world, we are helping to change the world around us too, because there is a race consciousness, and that race consciousness, God only knows, does need some changing and some fixing up sometimes. So what we're looking at here is this universal law that is always at work. Ernest Holmes calls it the law of cause and effect, which means that cause is the mind. It's the thought, the thinking, the thoughts in our minds that are creating whatever it is that's happening in our lives. But here's the thing. I was reading a couple of decades ago now, I think it was in the chapter called What the Mystics Have Taught, and suddenly just had this huge aha, which if I'd thought about it intensely, I would have known anyway, where Dr. Holmes says, forget the law, know that it works. It's like gravity. If you pick up a piece of paper and drop it, it will float to the ground. It's gravity. We know it's not going to float up unless there's a windstorm, but eventually it's going to land on the ground. That's the way the law of gravity works. And so it's the same way with our consciousness. It's the same way with God. This universal law only knows how to work according to what we believe, according to what we're thinking. And so he said, forget the law, focus upon the word. And when I read that, it was just a sudden, it was like a sunburst inside me. And I thought, right, we spend so much time in this teaching thinking about all of the various elements of the teaching that we forget sometimes that we can simplify it. We don't have to think about all of the component parts. We simply need to focus upon the word. And the word goes into the law, and the word is made law. The word is made manifest. And so the title of my talk today is Just What Do You Believe? Just what do you believe anyway? What is it that is creating the life that is around you right now? And 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 as I'm thinking about the power of the word, it's particularly important to me today. Um, I I don't know how many of you watch the news. You all know that I watch the news. And my talk this week was already pretty well prepared, I think, on Tuesday. And as you know, every once in a while, I'll just jettison a talk and do a new one because something has happened that I feel compelled to address. I don't do it all the time, but I really feel compelled to address today what happened in America last week, this week just behind us. On Wednesday, I think it was around 11:30, my daughter texted me and said, "Mom, are you watching what's going on in Washington, D.C.?" Now, when Kendall does that, we're both she is a journalist still. I am a former journalist. When she does, I know that it is something that I really need to look at. So I turned on the television set and I could not believe what I was seeing. If you were watching, if you've watched any news since, you have seen the American Capitol being desecrated by people who were rioting. People have been called domestic terrorists. 2 hours prior to that, the president held, or rather, just prior to that, the president held a rally for 2 hours, basically telling people to march and to fight. The power of the word. I started really looking at that and thinking, the power of our own words is significant, but where do we get our own words, our own thoughts from? How many people got their words, their thoughts this past 4 years, and maybe 5 years during the election process, from the President of the United States? How many of them started to believe all of the things that he was saying, even though we were exposed repeatedly to lies and lies and lies? There was a psychologist that I listened to yesterday who said that for those people who have bought into all of the Trump lies and the word that the election was fraudulent, which it hasn't been, that there's an emptiness inside. There's something inside each of those people that needs to be filled. And so they find fulfillment in unusual ways. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody finds them in ways that lead to violence or lead to believing untruths, but we're all seeking. And if there's an emptiness there, we are seeking. And when someone resonates with that emptiness, when someone resonates with it, we start to build a story around it. And Trump was a master at weaving a story that was not a true story. And we have seen the last few days saying that the election was indeed an honest election and there was absolutely no fraud. There was no evidence of fraud anywhere. Zero evidence of fraud. And so here in the nation's capital, the Congress was meeting, the House of Representatives and Senate meeting separately at first to certify the election. And all of a sudden, there were people with weapons. There were people with what do they call, tire irons, who were hitting at the doors, trying to break the doors open. There were people breaking windows. There were people crawling through the windows. I was sitting there in total shock. And then I saw the image of the man in Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office, leaning back with his feet on the desk, and then showing a threatening message that he'd written on a file folder that was on her desk. And I started to cry. I started to cry that there could be such the appearance of something which looked so evil. And I phoned Reverend Joanna right away, and I got in touch with our prayer team right away and said, pray for the United States of America. And then I sent out a message to everyone on our email list. So you would likely have all received that. There were people outside who had put up a noose, and they were shouting, hang Pence, hang Pence, hang the vice president, who was a Republican, because he had said that the election was fair and square. I didn't think I would ever live to see this happen in America. And so while I changed my talk today, it still is consistent with my title, which is, what is it that you believe? Just what is it that you believe? We really need to examine our thoughts. Where do they come from? Do they come from race consciousness? Do they come from a handful of people out there? Do they come from groups? Apparently, this growing number of white supremacists in the United States began in small groups. And what happened with Donald Trump is these groups started to find one another through social media, and they have become bigger and bigger and bigger, and more powerful in the way that they respond, and more violent in the way that they respond. So what is it that we believe anyway? Do we just take everything at face value that we hear? Or do we start to contemplate what it is that we hear? Are we thinking for ourselves? Or is it that, well, they say? I mean, I can remember growing up hearing people, adults around me, saying, well, you know what they say, and they say this and they say that, the great they. And then, I mean, in recent years, if people say that to me, I'll say, well, who are they? Who are the they that you're talking about? And that usually just stops them in their tracks. They don't know how to respond to that. We need to be consistent with our consciousness and with our own thinking, looking at the highest and the best all of the time. And as I was watching this dreadful thing unfolding, I was thinking, okay, is there a gift in this? What is the gift in this? And of course, many people in the Senate were going to challenge the certification of the election, and a number of people in the House were going to do the same thing. And I thought, well, maybe what's going to happen here that's going to be positive is that those who are going to oppose it are actually going to back down and certify it. Well, in the Senate, that did happen to a large degree. It didn't happen so much in the House, but it was one bit of positivity. And yet, excuse me, and yet I look at the terror that some of those people were feeling. I mean, immediate Vice President Pence and the House Nancy were taken off somewhere so that they would be safe. And the members of Congress were then put together in one room somewhere where they were considered to be safe. But some of them were up in the what I'll call the balcony, and they couldn't get out. And so security had put furniture against the door, and there was a woman, one of the members of Congress, lying on the floor with someone holding her hand. And she was obviously in terror. And later, when she was interviewed, she said that she phoned her husband to tell him where her will was. And apparently the people who were sequestered, many of them were calling the family, saying goodbye to them because they thought they were going to be killed that day. What kind of a society is it that we live in where this can happen? And it shows the power of the word of one man who is considered to be deranged, who is considered to be a narcissistic sociopath or psychopath, who can influence so many people. We have seen this happen before in history, and we're seeing it happen again. But, let us hold in consciousness that this cannot go on any further. Let us, in our prayers, pray for peace. Let us pray for a peaceful transition of power. Let us pray that in the inauguration that President Biden and Vice President Harris will be safe, and that those who are attending will be safe, and that safety is there for every person. Not everyone who was in that crowd that marched that day was someone who wanted to commit heinous acts on people. I mean, there were some people who said, well, we just wanted to walk. We didn't want any of this to happen. You could see that they were sincere in that. And then there were the people that we saw who were committing crimes inside that were really terrible, and 5 people died. Anyway, enough. If you saw it yourself, you know how dreadful it was. And if you didn't see the news, then that's what's prompted me to speak about this today, because we truly, truly need to be conscious about what it is that we're doing. We need to go into this teaching and be consistent with it, not just some of the time, but all of the time. We need to remember that our thoughts are things. Our thoughts are things. They're in the invisible. And they're moving from the invisible into the visible according to how passionately we believe them. And so it's really time for us to do a check on ourselves. I know that all of you are really, really good people. You're loving people. You think the highest and best of everybody. And I bless you for that. And we need to keep doing it. And as we do, we need to see that in others everywhere. And we need to pray for that for all of humanity. We need to remember that God finds an outlet God finds an outlet in and through everything. That means everyone and everything. We are outlets for God. Everyone is an outlet for God. And the thing is that we need to remember from this teaching is that God is impersonal. We don't really like to hear that. We want to think God is caring about everything we do. This is an intelligence that is impersonal. And so whatever the outlet is it's God that is helping to manifest it. That is the power that is manifesting it. And so if there are thoughts that we consider to be evil going on, then that's what is going to be manifested in our lives. Now, the thing is, there is only one power. There are not 2 powers. There is not a power for good and a power for evil. There is one power. And as Dr. Holmes said, to say that evil doesn't exist is foolhardy. Of course it exists, but it is the misuse of the one power. When we use our consciousness in healthy, happy, positive ways, then we are creating good in our lives and in the lives of others. And when we buy into the negative thinking, then we are creating more of that. And that's the great danger in this time as we are looking at, as we are looking at what is happening and what has been happening. If we start worrying about that and focusing upon that exclusively, then we are helping with the creation of more of it. And so we need to step aside from that. We need to rise above that. And as we rise above that, we need to see a world that is at peace. We need to see nations that are operating with the highest possible consciousness and leaders that are doing the same. And we need to be in prayer for those people everywhere, for leaders everywhere, and in prayer for all humanity, that love is awakened in every heart right here and right now. Maybe people have never felt it before. There are people who are living in dire circumstances all over the world, who are living in war zones and going through terrible things. Let us feel the love awakened in their hearts and in the hearts of leaders, in the hearts of people everywhere, and let us finally see those weapons laid down. And let us not be using our words as weapons. Let us be using our words for good, for the good of all humanity. This is the time. This is the time. This is the time for us to make incredible changes. There are a sufficient number of people on this planet who believe in what we believe, in what we teach. There's sufficient number that, and they're under the radar, as Dr. Ken Gordon said a couple of years ago, they're under the radar. But one of these days, they're going to all come together. They're going to be out in the streets, excuse me, marching for good and for love and for peace. And it will be like the Arab Spring, except it will be all for good rather than for anything evil. And so that is what our focus needs to be on upon that day when the world marches for peace, when the world marches for good for all humanity, when the world marches for love. This is the time. There's something I've read many times over through the years by many different writers who have said that when love rises, that everything unlike it comes up to be healed. Let us look at this time as the things that have come up that are so appalling to us are coming up to be healed. And let us pour our love out over everyone, because that is going to make a big difference. What is it that we believe? Let us go back to the fundamentals. Let us understand that what we really believe is what we're manifesting. And let us take charge of our thoughts. As Emma Curtis Hopkins said, stand guardian at the gates of your thoughts. Stand guardian at the gates of your mind. It is so important for us to do that. And of course, the Bible says, excuse me, the Bible says it is done unto you as you believe. And that is so true. It is done unto us as we believe, individually and collectively. And I loved what Wayne Dyer said when he said, it wasn't seeing is believing, it was believing is seeing. It's if you believe it, you will see it. You know, it turns it right around. We have to examine the power of our beliefs and know that that's what we're going to see in our lives. And it takes consciousness, it takes daily practice to be in that place. It takes a knowing inside us that we have that power. We have the power of God within, all power within us to make this so. And, you know, as Don Miguel Luis said, be impeccable with your word. When we recognize how powerful the word is, let us be impeccable with our word, but also let us be impeccable with our thoughts. You know, we can say, I'm going to be impeccable with my word. I'm going to say nice things to everybody. But if I'm not thinking those nice things, then the word really is pretty hollow, because what I'm thinking and believing is not going to be manifesting good in my life. I've had so many people say to me, how can there be religious people? They were talking about the United States. How can there be people in the religious right who can condone what is happening, who can perpetrate it, who can believe all the lies, who can support a president like Donald Trump? How can they be part of a religion and do that? And I would just throw up my hands and say, beats me. It makes no sense to me. And I don't want to criticize other religions, and I don't want to criticize other people either. However, sometimes we need to talk about things and we need to think about things. And an old friend of mine was talking to me a couple of weeks ago, maybe a bit longer than that. And he grew up a Baptist, excuse me, right-wing Baptist. He married a Baptist woman. He lived in the States for many years, now lives in Canada. And his family was part of the religious right. And he said that as long as you followed the rules of the church, it didn't matter what you did. And he said the rules of the church, he's a fallen away Baptist, I have to say. The rules of the church were that you couldn't dance, you couldn't go to movies, you couldn't wear makeup, you couldn't wear jewelry, you had to tithe 10% of your gross income to the church or else. And, excuse me, he said those were the rules of the church. His mother wore a necklace to church one Sunday morning, and she was almost ostracized from the church. However, his father was the accountant for the church, and they needed him. So they told her that if she never wore jewelry to church again, that she could stay. And as a little boy, he was terrified that he was going to go to hell if any of these, if his mother committed a sin of wearing jewelry to church. He said they could have gone out, as Donald Trump said, they could have gone out on Fifth Avenue and killed somebody. They could have committed any one of the 10 commandments, could have committed a so-called sin against them, and it would be absolutely fine. But they had to follow the rules of the church. And all of a sudden, when he said that, I said, if that's true and that's not true of everybody who's a Baptist, and it's not true of everybody who's, part of a fundamentalist religion, but if it's true of a sector of American society, possibly Canadian, I don't know, then all of a sudden you can understand why they would trust what Trump was saying, why they would believe what he was saying, because the integrity, the rules that we apply to our lives, the dignity, is just not there. And I don't even like to think that that's possible, that people do live that way, but I guess they do. And my friend said, as soon as he was old enough to realize that religion had destroyed his life, destroyed his first marriage, he then married the love of his life, who was an Episcopalian, that he was able to just shed all of that. He was able to see what it was for what it was worth and understand that there is a different kind of spirituality. But he said, when you grow up with it, when your parents are part of it, you believe it. And so what is it that we believe, that we grew up with, that might not be serving us right now? And I'm not talking about violence and so on. I'm talking about those things in our own lives that we would like to shift in this new year. The things that we would like to see growing us into greater happiness and greater health and greater prosperity. The greater friendship, greater love, all of those things. Is there something there that we need to shift? And if there is, then let our prayers be such that that's what we do every day, and let's practice. I remember someone once saying to me, she was a psychologist that I met on the island of Maui, and she said, if you need to forgive somebody, remember a time in your life when you totally, totally loved someone in the most powerful way. If you have children, it might have been the baby you held in your arms, or it's the person you fell in love with. But whatever it happens to be, just go to that place and feel that love, and then direct it toward those you need to forgive. Direct it toward those who are doing things that you don't like. Because as we do that, as we allow that love to grow in us and to pour outward, it doesn't have time to dissipate immediately. And so we are sending love to people we might consider our enemies. But let us not look at anybody as our enemies. Let us look at each one as an individualized expression of God, because that's what we are. And let's look for the God within and know that we can love the God within. If we can't get beyond anything else, we can love the God within. We may not like what they do, but we can know that God is in there, and we can pray that God within turns into the great God of love that we all know. God becomes the power to us only when we recognize it as a power. God becomes the power to us only when we recognize it as a power. That means if we're going about our lives randomly and we're not recognizing this power in our lives, if we're not recognizing this truth, then we're not in control of our lives. We're not consciously in control. What is it we believe? What faith do we have? Is the faith in the power within us, or is the faith in someone else's power? Thing is, the power itself is always the same. As I said earlier, there aren't two powers, there is only one power. But what are we buying into? Are we buying into somebody else's thoughts, somebody else's ideas, or are we thinking for ourselves? I love what Dr. Holmes said when he said, stay open at the top. He didn't say that he was the be-all and end-all, but he said, the truth is within each of us. The truth will set us free. We need to know what that truth is, and we need to honor that power, that intelligence that is God within, that is the creator of everything and everyone, so that we can live in love and peace and grace. It is so important. It's always important, but never more than it is right now. God is your power. Believe it. Believe it with everything in you, that God is your power, and that power is there for you to use, and that you can use it for good, not just for yourself, but for people everywhere. The thing is, we need to do it. We can't just pay lip service to it. We need to do it. Let us live in conscious awareness. A couple of days ago, Reverend Petra Wells, who is a doctor of divinity in religious science, sent out a message to all ministers everywhere, asking that we consider using this. Send it to head office and through head office. And I'm only going to read a little bit because it's very long, but I'm going to send it out by email so that if you want to read all of it, you can do so. Petra's an amazing, powerful minister. She's in Dallas. She co-ministers with Karen Fry, who's her partner. And those two women are mighty, I have to tell you. So Dr. Wells says, "We are outraged and heartbroken by deaths and watching Nazi flags enter the Capitol building. It was in an attempt to intimidate and silence the representatives of the people. We are especially outraged that this treasonous insurrection was instigated and fueled by a lame duck president and supported by political and religious leaders and ordinary people who turned a blind eye to the growing implications of increasingly divisive, hate-filled, and egocentric rhetoric. This has once again played out on the national stage and revealed a festering bigotry and fear in the psyche of our nation. Science of mind stands for a philosophy, a spirituality, and a way of life grounded in principles of love and law. Law which recognizes our oneness and celebrates our diversity. Law which is the power of creation that is forever at work, manifesting inner consciousness in outer form. This is true whether we are talking about an individual life or the life of a nation. Therefore, we recognize that our spiritual and social lives rest on taking personal responsibility for the effects of our beliefs and the way those beliefs become words and actions. We begin with cosmic and universal no. We refute, repudiate, and in every way deny that there is any spiritual validity to any belief, consciousness, ideology, or person who sows hatred, excuse me, or who believes power and money are our primary values, and who operates counter to our highest ideals and aspirations by inflaming division and sanctioning force, seeking to overthrow the will and consciousness of the soul of our nation. Excuse me, today we do not succumb to fear, anger, yet we are willing to call out and say no to that which is not in alignment with any spirituality or world faith, nor the vision of our democracy." And then she goes on to quote Ernest Holmes, and she says, "Today we stand with and for those who take responsibility to create a democracy and a nation that continually aspires to live highest ideals." It goes on from there. I will send it out by email if it's something that you would like to read and to think about. I emailed Petra right away and thanked her for it and said, Canada is also praying for you today and will continue to pray for you. And we hold you in our hearts, and we hold you in safety. We hold you in prayer. We hold you in consciousness, knowing that the highest and best now is unfolding for the United States of America and for countries throughout the world. That's really what is ours to do. And let us all take time in the days and weeks ahead to hold this in our hearts and to practice this in our minds and to reevaluate our beliefs to ensure that they are the highest and best, knowing that our thoughts and our beliefs are going to change this world. And so it is. I bless you all. I thank you for all that you do. I thank you for your contributions to our center. They keep us going during these troubled times. We are so grateful for all that you give and for all that you do, and for the volunteer work that you do too. I acknowledge all of you because I know that each one of you who is online today does something that makes a big difference in our lives. And I would like to invite Reverend Joanna to do a closing prayer for us today.
Thank you, Reverend Carrie. As we take this time this morning to gather virtually, we give thanks for the truth of our teaching and give thanks for the knowledge that the power of prayer is greater than any apparent evil that we might see on a television screen. The power of love and the law is ever available, ever present, ever operating, regardless of appearances. And I know this to be true. As the unfolding of a new day, a new way of making democracy work, of making government work in service to the people, is unfolding through these apparently difficult times. And let us remember the power of our words, our thoughts, and our prayers as we enter this new year, bright with promise, knowing that perfect health is available now to each one of us, that the perfection of love lies at the root of all there is. And as we acknowledge this truth, each of us carries within us that divine spark that has the power to shape the universe. For we are all one in spirit, and in that oneness, as in Rachel's lovely meditation this morning, we remember that we are the one self, the one that is all there is, that we are unity, and in that unity, there is only love, peace, and as we declare that truth, we know that this bright day is the first day of a bright future. A future filled with peace, love, and good health. I give thanks for Reverend Carrie, Reverend Rachel, Lesia, and how lovely to see Reverend Raymond and Glenda back with us, and Reverend Jennifer. These teachings have drawn all of us to be together here this morning, to share in spirit the power of that divine love that is everywhere present. I give thanks for our community, for this time that we share, and release my word to spirit, to the law, knowing it is so, and so it is.
So it is. Bless you all. It's wonderful to see you. Have a wonderful week. And I just send you love and blessings and virtual hugs to everybody until we can be in person and hug one another again. Love you all.